Richard Holden to move the motion.
Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Hook, and it's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, and thank you for stepping in today. I'd just like to, first of all, thank the Backbench Business Committee for allowing this debate, and also to the members, I know many of whom can't be here, from across the House and all parties and all parts of the United Kingdom, for coming to support it, including members who have the Great Highland Show in their constituency, the Royal Welsh Show, which has obviously happened in recent days, and the Balmoral Show from the Royal Ulster, which is run by the Royal Ulster Agricultural Society. And today we're considering that this House has considered the importance of agricultural and county shows to rural Britain. Now, Britain has a long and proud tradition of agricultural and county shows. The 350 shows that take place a year fuel economic activity in our rural communities and provide incalculable value to the societies that they celebrate. They showcase the very best of farming, and they contribute around 115 billion a year to the economy when you consider the whole agricultural sector combined. Now, one of the reasons I'm so keen to talk about this subject, Madam Chairman, is because the first show in England took place in 1763, I am reliably informed, in my patch of northwest Durham and in the town of Woolsingham. Since then, they have become central to the social fabric and economy of the parishes, villages and towns of northwest Durham. And right across the country, they've become wildly popular, with modern Britain seeing over 7 million people attending these shows annually. Agricultural shows span the length and breadth of northwest Durham, and they range from some of the largest fairs like the Woolsingham Show, which attracts tens of thousands of visitors to the town every year, to smaller ones like the historic Stanhope Show, which is over 180 years old now, and some of my very smallest, which really celebrate the towns, the very most rural parishes, like the Blanchland and Hunstonworth Show, right up in the North Pennines. Now, County Durham has a rich history of farming, stretching back thousands of years, and the Normans enclosed large areas of it with the County Palatine of Durham back in the early Middle Ages. And some of the land up in the rural North Pennines around that time was cleared for farms, mining, and also for particularly for small-scale cattle raising and sheep farming up on the hills. And in the 19th century, people in Weardale also often subsidised their work in the mines with having small holdings as well, subsistence farming. And today, county shows still provide a really strong link for that real rich agricultural history for places across County Durham, but also across the country, with the present-day societies. And while agriculture has obviously fundamentally changed over the centuries, these county shows, and they have evolved as well, but they still are a unique point at which allows our towns and villages to really come together. Agricultural shows provide people with a unique opportunity to celebrate what makes our local rural communities so special. They incorporate a huge range of rural activities, such as dry stone walling, which I tried my hand at the Weardale Agricultural Show up in St John's Chapel last year. And also to things like sheep shearing, which I know many honourable members are always keen to take part in. And despite the huge diversity in attractions, animals and events on display, what they have in common is a local pride they instil within people and in the small local communities in which they serve. I think particularly of the fact that cattle are still very much at the heart of even the larger shows in my constituency, like the Woolsingham Show. And it's very much the highlight of the day is having those the winners paraded around the ground, even with those much broader attractions that are now on offer. These shows really do enrich our local communities. I think they really help reinforce social cohesion. And they're also an invaluable asset to modern Britain. Unfortunately, as we've all seen over the last couple of years, COVID did put a stop to some of these shows. And I was just at the Eastgate Sheep Show back in May, and that was the first time since I've been elected an MP in 2019 that it was able to go ahead. However, this year I'm really hoping to see people returning en masse to our county and agricultural shows. to help our communities really rediscover those social benefits that I think we all took for granted not that long ago, but which are now really, we've now realised just how important they are. I look forward as well later in the summer to visiting the Weird Ale Agricultural Show in St John's Chapel, to Walsingham Show and to Stanhope Show again. Farms are intrinsic to the identity and image of rural Britain, and without them there would be no such green and pleasant land that we all enjoy. And they play a really important part in ensuring that our rural communities are also connected to our local towns. While farming practices have changed, meaning you don't need huge proportions of the population actually working the ground and the land anymore, what they do show is that they provide an absolute symbol for many people in those small towns and villages and a real connection with the land which actually feeds our nation and other nations across the world. I'd welcome any member from across to come and visit my patch this summer. British tourism is obviously incredibly important, and it's not just the local, the agricultural shows itself which are the driver, but they also provide a real anchor for so many other rural activities, particularly rural pubs, which I'm a very keen supporter of, being a member of the APPG, and also that hospitality trade, which in so much of rural Britain has also been hammered during the COVID pandemic. So I would urge anybody who's thinking of travelling around the country this summer to anchor it with a rural show and spend some time in those rural villages too. In modern era, farms are now at the frontier of so many environmental measures too, with farmers committed to working as much as possible in harmony with nature while producing sustainable and nutritious food and products from their land. And I'm very glad to see that when we come back in September, the trade agreements which we've negotiated will be being addressed in the second reading in the House. And I'm also been very glad to see that the Department has also had CRAG there to ensure that Britain's agricultural interests are looked after. And the Government is driving forward with these changes to Britain's agricultural sector at the moment, following our exit from the EU, with ELMS really providing, I hope, over time, a real environmental link in, while also ensuring that good food production is maintained in the UK. Of course I will.
Grateful to my honourable friend giving way, and just as he rightly highlighted the importance of agriculture being and remaining at the heart of these county shows that he's very eloquently describing, does he agree with me that food production must remain at the heart of UK agricultural strategies? It doesn't mean that we are ignorant about the net zero challenge and some of the environmental imperatives as well, but keeping British farmers farming, producing high quality food must be the overriding goal.
I absolutely agree with my right honourable friend, and he's absolutely right to highlight that. And it's not just in agricultural farming as well, it's also, I'm sure his community would reflect, in also our fishing industry as well, that we have to see, and nothing has been brought home just more recently than what's happened overseas, and the impact, the knock-on impact in terms of inflation of food prices has happened here, and also in that security element as well. So I think he makes a very valid point, and it's one I'll pick up on a little bit more later in my speech as well. Of course I will.
Way, and I think I would agree with the point that my friend from Presley Pembrokeshire has made, but don't we also need to be realistic in this debate and ensure that we have a much more liberal view towards migration policy if we're to support the UK's agricultural sector, because there is no doubt that we have a workforce shortage that so far the government is not doing enough on.
Thank you very much, and I thank the member for Glasgow East for raising that point. I think one of the important measures that I would say to him, though, is that we need to have a really productive farming sector, and I'm really glad that some of the measures that the government is looking to bring forward in terms of trying to drive that productivity. If you look across the sea to actually to Holland, one of the big things that they've really done over the last few years, and they actually have more people employed in their agricultural sector than we do, but it's in very productive farming measures, and I think there's got to be a broader picture, but I think particularly capital investment is going to be essential if we're going to really not just grow our way out of the issues we face as in terms of food security, but also in terms of the rural economy as well. And just to pick up on a broader theme I think both members have highlighted, one of the things I'm really keen on seeing is that we put our focus on the environment where it can do most good. So in my area, we've got huge amounts of upland peat, and currently there's a lot of grip removal going on there, which is helping to ensure that our rural communities can be basically carbon capture and storage on land, on relatively low value agricultural land, really. And I think if we can concentrate, but those per acre, peat takes up 4 times as much carbon dioxide as forestry. So I'd much rather concentrate on where we can get the biggest bang for the environmental buck and not be pushing afforestation as widely as possible, particularly on higher value agricultural land. And I know that's something that I've discussed with ministers and the government is actually moving towards, which I think is a particularly important point. Now, British farming is a foundation of the UK's actually largest manufacturing centre. In fact, you couldn't have had an industrial revolution without an agricultural revolution before it. And despite the enormous output and specialisation and diversification and Britain's farms produce with their premium products, I think it's really important that we also see that it was only through that agricultural revolution that we saw the industrial revolution, and also now we try and have some of that, perhaps another agricultural revolution, which is why I'm so keen on ensuring we get some of the real capital into our farming communities to help drive the next wave, because I think they go absolutely hand in hand with each other. And I'm proud of the unique output, and I'm proud of our farming communities, and I'm particularly proud to see them celebrated in these rural shows. And as I said, they really do bring together those local towns and local communities to really see what's happening on the farm. Because for so many people, our rural communities, and I'm sure honourable members from across the House will have seen this locally, what we don't want to see is our agricultural and rural communities just becoming holiday homes. And what we want to see is, of course, I'll give it to the honourable friend from Innismon.
May I thank the honourable member from North West Durham, who's giving an excellent speech, particularly highlighting the importance of these shows to rural communities. Now, the Anglesey Agricultural Show on the 9th and 10th of August is perhaps the most high-profile event in the Ynys calendar. It's got a proud history going back over 200 years, and over 50,000 people flock to the show to see livestock, equestrian events, local crafts and food, and this year, even giant tortoises. It's because of a team of hard-working volunteers that are behind this success. So does my right honourable friend agree with me that it's vital that we give support to shows like Anglesey to support our rural communities and rural heritage? And does he agree with me that I should help with the sheep shearing?
Well, I certainly think she should help with the sheep shearing, and I hope she shares some videos of that on her social media. But I think she raises a particularly important point about the volunteers behind these shows. Without, and I've seen it myself on the ground, without those volunteers often running the committees, putting up the signs, doing the fundraising to ensure that they're often the judges themselves will be volunteers as well at many of these shows. I think they are the backbone of them, and they reflect that real link between the rural communities and the shows. And I would obviously encourage as many people as they can to drop down to the Anglesey show as well. But I think that comes back to the point I was just making around tourism in the rural areas. We've got to ensure that our rural areas are really thriving hubs of, yes, agriculture, also environmental land management, and also tourism. But we've got to ensure that they don't die either, and they're not just these essentially dormitory villages or second homes. It's really important that these local communities are able to thrive, and that those real links between agriculture and the broader economy and our lives are maintained. And I think that's one of the reasons these shows, including obviously the Anglesey show, are so important. I think, as I was saying just before, Madam Chairman, we must ensure that the farmers are as productive as possible and that they grow for Britain. And I think that's the point the Honourable Member for Preseli Pembrokeshire was making. And direct interaction between the farming community through county shows actually probably helps address some of these issues and actually addresses some of the concerns that people might have as well. To see some of those some of the diversification that's taking place in the sector. And there is a danger always of an urban disconnect with rural Britain. And I think that's one of the reasons these shows are so important, because they provide such an easy link and a very accessible link to people from across the country with our rural communities. And I just want to touch on a point I was making earlier, which is obviously in light of the rising costs of food, we're starting to see people looking again at food in a slightly different way. The Russian blockade of Ukraine has caused huge problems following their illegal invasion of that country. And it's not so much that Britain needs to be totally self-sufficient in everything, but Britain certainly needs to be more self-sufficient than it has been. I remember when I was a special advisor looking at the balance of trade between Britain and other countries, and one of the biggest things that we were importing, which we could actually easily do here, was around food. And I'm particularly glad that the government's starting to look at that area, how we can become more productive and grow more in the UK. I think that's also particularly important when we look at the environment at the moment as well, because we want to see those food miles reduced as much as possible and things grown in the UK, and those transportation costs and the environmental impact of those transportation costs, I think we need to take more account of in the UK, rather than just the bottom line in terms of either price or anything else. So Britain's farms are also essential to our national economic interests, not just because they look great and they keep our country looking great, but because we need them to be as productive as possible to help our country. Country fairs are central to that rural economic fabric and for highlighting that great work that our farmers do. They provide unmatched social benefits to our towns and villages, and county fairs also, I think, play a pivotal role, and we saw the county flags outside around Parliament Square just yesterday, showing that they are also at the heart of rural Britain too. I think also the fairs provide that brilliant actual opportunity for perhaps some transfers of knowledge as well, getting farmers together and getting to see innovations, and so that best practice can be spread amongst the rural community. They provide a value beyond the locality as a source of income generation for the wider community, for the people visiting, and also, I think, an eye-opener for what farming is actually about in modern Britain. The largest shows, such as the Royal Cornwall, which I know the Minister is a great fan of, the Great Yorkshire Show, which I'm sure will be mentioned by my honourable friendly member for Harrogate, a Three Counties Show, the Royal Highlands Show, Royal Welsh Balmoral, are all there not just in their local interest, but actually have a national and often international interest in them too. And this offers also a new set of opportunities for our farmers to diversify their operations, expand into new markets and find new, much-needed revenue sources. Rural Britain must maintain its cherished position within the national fabric. It's imperative that we protect and promote county and agricultural fairs across modern Britain, and to do everything we can to ensure that they thrive into the future. They provide a stage at which the very best of our rural towns and villages can be showcased, as well as a much-needed driver for innovation, investment, tourism in our rural economies. The importance of them cannot be underestimated, and I look forward myself to visiting my rural shows in Walsingham, Stanhope, Hunstonworth and St John's Chapel later this summer. Thank you very much, Madam Chairman.
The question is that this House has considered the importance of agricultural and country shows to rural Britain.